The phone call came at exactly 3:27 on a Tuesday afternoon, while I was debugging code at my desk in downtown Austin. Emma's voice carried that familiar tone she used whenever she'd done something catastrophic, but wanted to sound casual about it. "Oh, sorry, Drax. I left your luxury car with the keys inside at the Barton Creek Mall, and now it's gone," she said, as if she was commenting on the weather. My $78,000 BMW M4 competition that I'd saved for 2 years to buy was just vanished, according to my sister who'd borrowed it 3 hours earlier. I set my phone down carefully on my desk, staring at the dual monitors displaying lines of code that suddenly seemed insignificant. The BMW wasn't just a car to me. It represented countless late nights, freelancing skipped vacations, and carefully planned budgets. As a senior software engineer at TechFlow Solutions here in Austin, I made decent money, but luxury purchases required sacrifice and discipline. Emma had called me that morning with tears in her voice begging to borrow the car. She was 25, 3 years younger than me, and engaged to Tyler Brennan, a musician whose career consisted mainly of playing coffee shops and posting acoustic covers on social media. She needed to impress Tyler's parents at lunch, she'd explained, because they were wealthy socialites from Houston who judged people by appearances. "Please, Drax," she'd pleaded. "Tyler's parents think I'm not good enough for him. They've been making comments about my beat-up Honda Civic. If they see me in something nice, maybe they'll finally accept me into the family." Against my better judgment, I'd agreed. Emma had always been the emotional one in our family, quick to tears and dramatic gestures. Our mother, Patricia, had spent years accommodating her outbursts, and somewhere along the way, I'd learned to do the same. It was easier than dealing with the guilt trips and family drama. But 3 weeks earlier, Emma had dropped a bombshell that changed everything. She and Tyler wanted to have an elaborate engagement party that would cost $19,000. Not the actual wedding, just the engagement celebration. The venue catering, flowers, photography, and entertainment would drain what most people spend on a decent used car. "It's important to Tyler's family," Emma had explained when she'd cornered me at Sunday dinner at Mom's house. "They're expecting something elegant and sophisticated. Tyler's trust fund depends on making a good impression." I'd looked at the detailed breakdown she'd printed out. The flower arrangements alone cost $3,000. The photographer charged $4,000 for a single evening. The venue rental was $6,000, not including the mandatory catering package. "Emma, this is insane," I'd told her. "You could put a down payment on a house with this money." "You don't understand," she'd shot back. "Tyler's parents control his inheritance. If we don't meet their standards, he gets nothing. We're talking about his entire future." That's when she'd asked for my contribution. Not a small gift, not a few $100s to help with flowers. She wanted me to pay for the entire venue and catering, claiming it was a family investment in her happiness. "I just bought the BMW," I'd explained. "I've got payments insurance, and I'm trying to build up my emergency fund again. $19,000 is more than I can swing right now." The conversation had exploded from there. Emma accused me of being jealous of her engagement, of prioritizing material possessions over family. Patricia had joined in, suggesting I was being selfish, and that family should come before cars. "You make good money, Drax," Mom had said in that disappointed tone she'd perfected over the years. "You could afford to help your sister with something this important." But I'd stood firm. $19,000 for a single party felt excessive and irresponsible, especially when Emma and Tyler already had credit card debt and no solid financial plan for their future. I'd offered to contribute $2,000, which Emma had rejected with theatrical tears and accusations about my lack of love and support. Now, sitting in my office with the afternoon sun streaming through the windows, I felt a familiar knot in my stomach. Emma had borrowed my car specifically to impress Tyler's parents, and now it was gone. The timing felt suspicious, happening just hours after another heated family discussion about the engagement party funding. I called Emma back, but the phone went straight to voicemail. Then I tried Tyler, whose number I'd reluctantly saved after his third attempt to borrow money for studio time. No answer there either. My hands were steady as I dialed the Austin Police Department to report the theft. The dispatcher was professional, but not encouraging. Luxury vehicles were frequently targeted by professional theft rings, she explained. Recovery rates were low, especially if the car had been taken quickly and efficiently. Do you have comprehensive insurance? She asked. Yes, but I need to file a police report first. Understood. An officer will meet you at the scene to take your statement. Do you have the last known location? Barton Creek Mall, according to my sister who borrowed the vehicle. The drive to the mall in my backup car, a 10-year-old Honda Accord I kept for emergencies, gave me time to think. Emma's story had gaps. Professional car thieves didn't typically work busy shopping mall parking lots in broad daylight. They preferred isolated areas where they could work without witnesses. At the mall, I found the exact parking spot where Emma claimed she'd left the BMW. The area was well lit and visible from multiple store entrances. Security cameras covered every angle. If someone had stolen the car here, there would definitely be footage. Mall security was helpful, but bureaucratic. They couldn't release surveillance footage to me directly, but they'd cooperate fully with police investigation. The security supervisor, a retired police officer named Frank Morrison, walked the parking area with me. Luxury car thefts usually happen at night or in secluded areas, he observed. This location would be pretty bold for professionals. Too many witnesses, too much camera coverage. 40 minutes later, Officer Jennifer Caldwell arrived to take my statement. She was thorough and experienced, asking detailed questions about the vehicle, the circumstances of the theft, and Emma's timeline. Something in her expression suggested she'd heard similar stories before. Your sister left the keys in the car. She asked for the third time. According to her, yes. She said she was only going to be inside for 20 minutes to meet with a wedding planner. And the doors were unlocked. That's what she told me. Officer Caldwell made notes in her tablet, glancing occasionally toward the security office. We'll need to review the footage, but I have to ask, are you certain your sister didn't have permission to use the vehicle beyond the agreed time frame? The question caught me off guard. What do you mean? Sometimes family members have disagreements about vehicle usage, and it gets reported as theft when it's actually a civil matter. She called me to report it stolen herself, I pointed out. That's unusual, the officer admitted. Most people don't voluntarily report their own involvement in a theft. As we talked, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Insurance company needs to speak with you immediately regarding your BMW claim. Please call Detective Martinez at this number. The plot was thickening faster than I'd expected. Emma's simple mistake was turning into something much more complicated, and I was beginning to suspect that my family's financial manipulation had escalated to outright fraud. Detective Martinez's voice was serious when I called. Mr. Drax, we need to discuss your BMW case. Can you come to headquarters tomorrow morning? We've reviewed the security footage, and there are some discrepancies in the reported timeline that require clarification. My heart rate picked up, but not from anxiety, from anger. Emma's casual phone call was looking less like carelessness and more like calculated deception. The family pressure about the wedding money, the convenient timing of the theft, and now police interest in timeline discrepancies painted a picture I didn't want to believe, but couldn't ignore. That evening, I sat in my apartment reviewing bank statements and credit card activity. Everything appeared normal, but Detective Martinez's call had triggered a paranoid streak I didn't know I possessed. Emma had access to family emergency accounts that I'd set up years ago when Dad died. The arrangement was meant for genuine crises, but the definition of emergency had apparently expanded to include engagement party funding. I called my bank's 24-hour customer service line and requested detailed transaction histories for the past 6 months. The representative was helpful, agreeing to email comprehensive statements by morning. Something told me I was going to need documentation for whatever was coming next. As I prepared for bed, one thought kept circling through my mind. Emma's story about the car theft had too many convenient details, and not enough genuine distress. When people lose something valuable through carelessness, they're typically devastated, apologetic, and eager to make amends. Emma had sounded more like she was reading from a script. The next morning would bring answers, but I suspected they wouldn't be the ones I wanted to hear. Detective Martinez's office was cramped and functional, with stacks of case files covering every available surface. He was a veteran investigator in his 50s, with the patient demeanor of someone who'd heard every possible variation of human deception. "Mr. Thompson, thank you for coming in," he said, gesturing to a chair across from his desk. "I want to show you something that might surprise you." He turned his computer monitor toward me and pressed play on a security video file. The timestamp showed yesterday at 2:47 in the afternoon, about 40 minutes before Emma's phone call to me. The angle was from above, capturing the parking area, where she'd claimed to leave the car. I watched myself on the screen. Or rather, I watched Emma. She pulled into a parking space near the mall's main entrance, got out of the BMW, and walked toward the building. Nothing unusual so far. But then she stopped, turned around, and walked back to the car. She opened the driver's door, reached inside, and placed something on the roof of the vehicle. "Those are your keys," Detective Martinez explained. She put them on top of the car, not inside it. The video continued. Emma walked away again, but this time she kept looking back over her shoulder. She stopped at the mall entrance and stood there for several minutes, clearly watching the parking lot. Then she pulled out her phone and made a call that lasted about 2 minutes. That call was to Tyler Brennan at 2:51, the detective said. "We have phone records." On screen, Emma ended her call and walked into the mall, but not before taking one more long look at the BMW. The car sat undisturbed for 38 minutes. Then, at 3:25, 2 men approached the vehicle. They looked around cautiously before one of them reached up to retrieve the keys from the roof. They knew exactly where to look, Detective Martinez observed. This wasn't random opportunism. I watched in sick fascination as the men got into my car and drove away. Emma's theft was clearly a coordinated handoff. The men didn't break anything, force any locks, or search for keys. They walked directly to the car and took what had been left for them. The insurance company flagged this as suspicious within hours. The detective continued. Staged vehicle thefts usually involve family members or intimate partners. The patterns are predictable once you know what to look for. My phone was already buzzing with another call from Emma. This time I didn't answer. "We need to bring your sister in for questioning," Detective Martinez said. "But I wanted to speak with you first. Sometimes family members are unaware they're being used as part of insurance fraud schemes." "You think Emma planned this?" "The evidence suggests coordination between your sister, Tyler Brennan, and the 2 men who took the vehicle. We've identified one of them as Jake Morrison, who operates an unlicensed automotive repair facility on the east side. He's been suspected of involvement in vehicle theft rings for several years." Detective Martinez handed me a file folder containing printed emails and text messages. Tyler's phone records show extensive communication with Jake Morrison over the past 6 weeks. They were planning something involving a luxury vehicle matching your BMW's description. I flipped through the communications feeling sick as the scope of the deception became clear. Tyler had been researching my car's value insurance coverage and theft reporting procedures. Emma had provided detailed information about my work schedule, driving habits, and relationship with our mother. They were gathering intelligence, I realized. For weeks, the detective confirmed. This wasn't a spontaneous decision. They researched the insurance claim process, identified potential buyers for stolen luxury vehicles, and developed a timeline that would minimize suspicion. My phone rang again. This time it was Patricia, my mother. "Drax, Emma is hysterical," she said without preamble. "She thinks you're trying to get her arrested over an honest mistake. This is getting out of hand." "Mom, it wasn't a mistake. The police have video evidence showing Emma deliberately leaving the car for thieves to take." Silence on the other end of the line. Then, "That's impossible," Emma would never do something like that. I'm at the police station right now looking at security footage. She coordinated with Tyler and his friend to steal my car for insurance money. More silence. When Patricia spoke again, her voice was shaky. Even if that's true, she's your sister. Family doesn't turn family over to the police. Family doesn't commit felonies against each other either. I hung up and turned back to Detective Martinez, who'd been listening to my side of the conversation with professional interest. Family dynamics complicate these cases, he said. Victims often feel conflicted about pressing charges, even when the evidence is overwhelming. What happens next? We arrest Tyler Brennan and Emma for insurance fraud and conspiracy to commit theft. Jake Morrison is already in custody on unrelated charges, and he's been surprisingly cooperative about providing details of the operation. Detective Martinez leaned back in his chair, studying my face. There's something else you should know. This wasn't their first attempt at insurance fraud. Tyler has a history of targeting women with access to valuable assets. Emma fits a specific profile: emotionally vulnerable family money, or connections recent major life changes. The words hit me like a physical blow. Emma wasn't Tyler's criminal partner. She was his victim. He'd manipulated her into betraying her own family for a scheme that would ultimately destroy her life. How long has this been going on? Based on phone records and financial transactions, we believe Tyler began cultivating the relationship with your sister specifically to access your family's resources. The engagement appears to be part of the long-term plan. I thought about Emma's behavior over the past year. The sudden engagement to a man she'd known for only 6 months. The expensive lifestyle changes despite her modest income. The increasing pressure on family members to contribute financially to wedding plans. He targeted her. We see this pattern frequently. Sophisticated fraudsters identify vulnerable targets through social media dating apps or community connections. They build romantic relationships specifically to access financial resources or coordinate criminal activity. My phone buzzed with a text from Emma. Please don't let them arrest Tyler. I'll pay you back for everything, I promise. He didn't mean for this to happen. Even now, with overwhelming evidence of Tyler's manipulation, Emma was still protecting him. The depth of his psychological control over her was disturbing and sad. Detective Martinez continued briefing me on the investigation's findings. Tyler's criminal history included 2 previous convictions for fraud in California, both involving romantic relationships with women who had access to family wealth. He'd been married twice before, and both marriages had ended with his wives facing financial ruin and criminal charges. The pattern is consistent, the detective explained. He identifies targets, builds romantic relationships, gradually escalates financial requests, then coordinates major fraudulent schemes before disappearing to the next location. What about Emma? Will she be charged? That depends on several factors, including her level of cooperation with the investigation and her willingness to testify against Tyler and his accomplices. I felt torn between anger at Emma's betrayal and sympathy for her victimization. She'd been manipulated by a professional who specialized in exploiting emotional vulnerabilities, but she'd still chosen to betray family trust and participate in criminal activity. My phone rang again. This time, it was my bank's fraud department. Mr. Thompson, we're calling about suspicious activity on your accounts. Someone has been using family emergency access protocols to make unauthorized transactions over the past 3 months. The hits kept coming. Emma's involvement in the car theft was just the tip of the iceberg. Tyler's operation had been systematically draining my resources for months, while I remained completely unaware. How much are we talking about? $42,000 across multiple accounts and credit lines. The number was staggering. Tyler hadn't just stolen my car. He'd been stealing my financial future, one transaction at a time, using Emma as his inside accomplice. Detective Martinez was watching my face as I processed this information. Financial fraud often accompanies vehicle theft in these schemes, he said. Criminals rarely limit themselves to single targets when they have access to multiple revenue streams. I hung up with the bank and immediately called my insurance company to report the additional fraud. The representative was sympathetic, but warned that recovery of stolen funds would depend on successful prosecution and asset forfeiture from the perpetrators. As I left the police station, my phone was ringing constantly with calls from Emma Patricia and several unknown numbers. The unknown calls turned out to be from reporters who'd heard about the case through police scanner traffic. Apparently, luxury car theft rings were newsworthy in Austin, especially when they involved family betrayal and romance fraud. I drove home in my old Honda, thinking about how quickly my stable, predictable life had turned into a nightmare of betrayal fraud and public scrutiny. Emma's simple mistake had evolved into a federal case involving multiple felonies and tens of thousands of dollars in stolen assets. But underneath the anger and shock, I felt something else: determination. Tyler and his accomplices had picked the wrong target. I wasn't going to be another passive victim in their criminal enterprise. They'd messed with my family, stolen my property, and damaged my financial security. Now it was my turn to fight back. The war was just beginning, and I intended to win. The next morning brought a knock on my apartment door at 7:49. I opened it to find Emma standing in the hallway, her eyes red from crying and her hands shaking. Behind her stood Patricia, looking older than I'd ever seen her. "We need to talk," Emma said, her voice barely above a whisper. I let them in, but my patience was gone. The bank fraud department had called 3 more times since yesterday, revealing additional unauthorized transactions that pushed the total stolen amount to $57,000. "The police want to arrest me." Emma began collapsing onto my couch. "Detective Martinez said Tyler has been using me to steal from you for months." "Because he has been," I said, remaining standing. $57,000, Emma. "Tyler has been systematically draining my accounts using family emergency access that was supposed to be for genuine crises." Patricia made a small choking sound. $57,000! And that's just what they've found so far. Emma's tears came harder now. "I didn't know about all of it, I swear. Tyler said he was borrowing small amounts to cover wedding expenses until his trust fund payments started. He promised to pay everything back after we got married." I pulled up the bank statements on my laptop and turned the screen toward them. Transaction after transaction showed withdrawals, transfers, and charges that Emma had authorized using the family emergency protocols I'd established after Dad died. "Tyler's rent for 8 months," I said, pointing to recurring transfers. "His car payment, credit card bills, studio time for his band, a bachelor party in Las Vegas that cost $4,000. Emma, you've been funding his entire lifestyle." "He said it was temporary," she whispered. "Look at this one." I continued, clicking on another transaction. $1,500 for an engagement ring upgrade. You used stolen money to buy yourself a bigger diamond. That broke something inside Emma. She doubled over, sobbing uncontrollably. Patricia moved to comfort her, but I held up a hand. "Don't enable this anymore, Mom." Emma made choices. She chose Tyler over family. She chose fraud over honesty. She chose to steal rather than get a second job or live within their means. Patricia's face crumpled. "There's something else I need to tell you both." She reached into her purse and pulled out a thick folder of papers. "I've been covering some of Emma's debts for the past 2 years. She's been in financial trouble since college, and I didn't want her to ruin her credit or face bankruptcy." "What kind of debts?" I asked, though I dreaded the answer. "Credit cards mostly. Some medical bills from when she didn't have health insurance. Car repairs. Apartment deposits when she kept having to move." Patricia's voice was getting smaller with each revelation. "I took out a second mortgage on the house to pay them off." The room felt like it was spinning. "How much?" $38,000. I sat down heavily in my recliner, trying to process the scope of my family's financial dysfunction. Emma had been living beyond her means for years. Patricia had been enabling her irresponsible behavior, and Tyler had exploited both of their weaknesses to fund his criminal lifestyle. "Where did you think the money was coming from to pay for this engagement party?" I asked Emma. $19,000 for a single night celebration. Did you honestly believe Tyler's family was going to fund that? Emma looked up at me with genuine confusion. He showed me bank statements, trust fund documents, his parents' financial portfolio. They're worth millions, Drax. All fake, I said gently, feeling sorry for her despite everything. Detective Martinez told me yesterday. Tyler's parents aren't wealthy socialites from Houston. They're previous victims of his fraud schemes. He's been blackmailing them to maintain the facade of family wealth. The color drained from Emma's face. That's impossible. I opened my laptop again and pulled up the police report that Detective Martinez had emailed me. Tyler's real name is Marcus Thompson. He's 34, not 28 like he told you. He's been married twice before, and both wives ended up bankrupt and facing criminal charges after he convinced them to participate in insurance fraud schemes. Patricia was reading over my shoulder, her breath coming in short gasps. The wedding venue, she said suddenly. Emma signed contracts making you financially responsible if she couldn't pay. What? Emma nodded miserably. Tyler said it was standard procedure for expensive venues. They required a financially stable cosigner. I used your information because you have good credit. I felt like I was falling down a deep hole with no bottom in sight. You forged my signature on wedding vendor contracts. Tyler said it wasn't really forgery if we were family. He said you'd be happy to help once you saw how beautiful the wedding turned out. The doorbell rang, interrupting our increasingly surreal conversation. Through the peephole, I saw Detective Martinez and another officer I didn't recognize. Police. I called to Emma and Patricia. Do you want to go out the back way or face this like adults? Emma stood up slowly, wiping her eyes. I'll tell them everything. Tyler said if I got caught, I should blame you for pressuring me into helping with family finances. But I can't do that anymore. I opened the door and invited the officers in. Detective Martinez looked around the apartment, taking in the scene of family crisis with professional detachment. Emma Whitman, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit insurance fraud and identity theft, he said, producing handcuffs. You have the right to remain silent. As the Miranda warning continued, Emma looked at me with desperate eyes. Tyler said he loved me. He said we were going to have a beautiful life together. Was all of it fake? All of it, I confirmed. From the day he met you, this was his plan. The officers escorted Emma out of my apartment, leaving Patricia and me alone with the wreckage of our family's trust and financial security. She sat on my couch, staring at the floor in silence. I failed as a mother, she said finally. I created this situation by enabling Emma's irresponsible behavior for years. We all made mistakes, I admitted. I should have monitored the family emergency accounts more closely. I should have questioned Emma's sudden lifestyle changes. I should have insisted on meeting Tyler's family before allowing him so much influence over our finances. Patricia pulled out another document from her folder. There's one more thing. Tyler convinced Emma to apply for life insurance with you as the beneficiary, a large policy that would pay out if anything happened to her. The implication hit me like ice water. He was planning to kill her. I don't know. But the policy application was approved 3 weeks ago. $2 million with accidental death provisions. I called Detective Martinez immediately. This wasn't just financial fraud anymore. It was potentially conspiracy to commit murder. Tyler had been setting Emma up as both a criminal accomplice and a murder victim planning to collect insurance money after eliminating the witness to his crimes. When Detective Martinez called me back an hour later, his tone was grim. We found Tyler's laptop in his apartment. It contains detailed plans for staging Emma's death to look like suicide specifically caused by guilt over betraying her family. He researched methods, locations, and timing. The scope of Tyler's evil was breathtaking. He'd planned to destroy my family, financially frame Emma for the crimes, kill her, to prevent testimony, and collect life insurance money as the grieving widower. We'd been dealing with a predator whose cruelty exceeded anything I could have imagined. Is Emma safe? I asked. She's in protective custody pending arraignment. Tyler is being held without bail on federal charges, including conspiracy to commit murder. His operation was much larger than we initially realized. That evening, I sat in my apartment trying to process everything that had happened. My car was gone, my savings were depleted, my sister was in jail, and my mother was facing foreclosure on her house. Tyler's criminal enterprise had achieved its goal of destroying my family's financial stability and emotional bonds. But as I reviewed the evidence that Detective Martinez had shared, I noticed something that gave me hope. Tyler's operation was sophisticated, but not perfect. He'd left digital footprints, financial records, and communication trails that could be traced and documented. His previous victims could be identified and contacted. His assets could be located and seized. Tyler thought he'd targeted another passive victim who would quietly absorb the financial losses to avoid family embarrassment. He'd underestimated my willingness to fight back and my ability to gather resources for a counterattack. The war wasn't over. It was just beginning. And this time, I was going to be the one setting the terms of engagement. I woke up at 5:30 the next morning with absolute clarity about what needed to happen. Tyler and his accomplices had made one critical mistake. They'd left Emma alive to testify, and they'd targeted someone with both the resources and the determination to fight back systematically. My first call was to Rebecca Washington, the most aggressive attorney in Austin for white-collar crime defense and victim advocacy. She agreed to meet me for breakfast at 7, despite the short notice. $57,000 in direct theft, plus $42,000 in fraudulent contracts, plus your mother's $38,000 in debt relief. She calculated while reviewing my documentation. We're looking at potentially $137,000 in recoverable damages before we even consider pain and suffering. What about Emma? If she cooperates fully with federal prosecutors, she'll likely receive probation and community service. The key is getting her to testify against Tyler and his network before they pressure her to stay silent. Rebecca was in her 50s, with silver hair and the no-nonsense demeanor of someone who'd spent decades fighting financial predators. She understood immediately that this wasn't just about recovering money. It was about dismantling Tyler's entire criminal operation. The life insurance policy changes everything, she continued. That elevates this from theft to conspiracy to commit murder. Federal prosecutors will want to make an example of this case. We developed a 3-phase strategy. Phase 1, protect Emma and secure her cooperation. Phase 2, trace and freeze Tyler's assets before he could hide them. Phase 3, pursue civil action against Tyler's accomplices and recover maximum damages for all victims. How many other victims do you think there are? I asked. Based on the pattern you've described, probably dozens across multiple states. Tyler's operation appears to have been running for at least 5 years. My second meeting that morning was with Patricia at her house. She looked exhausted and defeated, surrounded by financial documents and legal papers scattered across her dining room table. I've been going through everything, she said, gesturing to the chaos. Emma's involvement with Tyler goes back further than any of us realized. She showed me bank statements revealing that Emma had been receiving regular payments from Tyler for almost a year. Not loans or gifts, but what appeared to be salary payments for services rendered. He was paying her to spy on our family, I realized, to gather information about my income assets and financial habits. $500 a month, Patricia confirmed. She deposited the checks into a separate account that I co-signed on years ago for emergencies. The depth of the betrayal was staggering, but it also provided crucial evidence for prosecution. Tyler hadn't just manipulated Emma emotionally. He'd hired her as a paid informant against her own family. My third call that morning was to Special Agent David Chen at the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit. Detective Martinez had referred the case to federal authorities due to the interstate nature of Tyler's operation and the murder conspiracy charges. We've been tracking Marcus Thompson, aka Tyler Brennan, for 18 months, Agent Chen told me. He's connected to a larger network of romance fraudsters, targeting middle-class families across the Southwest. Your case provides the first direct evidence of planned murder to eliminate witnesses. What about asset recovery? That's where it gets interesting. Thompson has been smarter about hiding money than most criminals we deal with. But his laptop contains encrypted files that our tech team is working to decode. We suspect there are significant hidden assets. Agent Chen wanted to meet with Emma immediately to begin debriefing her about Tyler's operation. The information she provided could help identify other victims and locate hidden assets. The key is getting her to understand that Tyler never loved her, he explained. These criminals are expert psychological manipulators. Even after arrest, victims often continue protecting their abusers. I spent the rest of the morning at the jail visiting Emma with her new attorney. She looked fragile and confused, still processing the reality of Tyler's deception. He showed me pictures of his family's mansion in Houston. She said, her voice hollow. He had fake business documents, fake trust fund papers, fake everything. How was I supposed to know it was all lies? Because you wanted to believe it, I said gently. Tyler offered you a fantasy life that seemed too good to be true, and you chose to ignore the red flags because the alternative was facing reality about your financial situation. Emma's attorney, Michael Rodriguez, was excellent at explaining the legal situation without sugarcoating the consequences. Emma faced potential federal charges that could result in 10 years in prison, but cooperation with investigators could reduce her sentence to probation and restitution payments. The choice is simple, he told her. Help us stop Tyler from hurting other families or become another casualty of his criminal enterprise. Emma agreed to cooperate fully. Over the next 6 hours, she provided detailed information about Tyler's operation, including names of other women he'd been dating simultaneously, locations where he stored stolen goods, and bank account information for money laundering activities. The scope of Tyler's network was impressive and disturbing. He maintained romantic relationships with 7 different women across Texas, New Mexico, and Colorado. Each woman believed she was his only serious girlfriend, and each was being systematically defrauded while providing information about their family's financial resources. He called it portfolio management, Emma explained. He said successful businessmen always diversified their investments and maintained multiple revenue streams. By evening, federal agents had arrested 3 of Tyler's accomplices and seized over $200,000 in cash and stolen merchandise from various locations. Jake Morrison, the auto mechanic who'd taken my BMW, provided additional details about the vehicle theft network in exchange for reduced charges. Your car is in a warehouse in San Antonio, Agent Chen informed me by phone. It's been partially disassembled but is restorable. We'll release it back to you once the evidence processing is complete. The day had been exhausting, but productive. Tyler's criminal empire was collapsing. Emma was cooperating with authorities, and asset recovery was exceeding initial expectations. But the most satisfying moment came when Agent Chen called me with an update on Tyler's arrest. He's demanding to make a phone call to someone he claims can provide his bail money. He keeps insisting that his business partners will have him released within hours. Any idea who he's trying to contact? His previous victims, the ones he's been blackmailing to maintain his fake identity as a wealthy socialite. Turns out they're relieved to finally have him arrested. They've been paying him hush money for years to keep quiet about their own involvement in his previous schemes. Tyler's house of cards wasn't just falling. It was collapsing spectacularly, taking down an entire network of financial predators and freeing their victims to reclaim their lives. As I drove home that evening, I felt something I hadn't experienced in weeks: hope. Tyler had picked the wrong target, underestimated the wrong family, and committed crimes against someone who had both the resources and the determination to fight back effectively. The war was turning in our favor, and Tyler was about to learn that some victims refused to stay victimized. 3 months after Tyler's arrest, I stood in Judge Harrison's courtroom watching as the man who'd nearly destroyed my family received his sentence. Federal prosecutors had built an ironclad case against Marcus Thompson, revealing the full scope of his criminal network across 4 states. The defendant operated a sophisticated criminal enterprise that targeted vulnerable individuals and families. Judge Harrison said, his voice carrying the weight of judicial authority. The evidence shows systematic financial fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy to commit murder spanning 5 years and affecting 43 known victims. Tyler, wearing an orange jumpsuit and shackles, showed no emotion as the sentence was read. 43 years in federal prison, without possibility of parole. His accomplices received sentences ranging from 8 to 15 years, depending on their level of involvement and cooperation with authorities. Emma sat in the gallery behind me, having completed her community service and begun making restitution payments ahead of schedule. She'd been sentenced to 3 years probation, 800 hours of community service, and full financial restitution to all affected family members. The court recognizes that Ms. Whitman was herself a victim of the defendant's manipulation, Judge Harrison had said during her sentencing hearing 6 weeks earlier. However, victimization does not excuse criminal behavior. Ms. Whitman made choices that harmed her own family, and accountability is essential for both justice and healing. Emma had accepted responsibility completely, working 2 jobs to pay restitution and volunteering with victim advocacy organizations in her spare time. The change in her was remarkable. Gone was the entitled, emotionally manipulative person who demanded $19,000 for an engagement party. In her place was someone who understood the value of money, the importance of honest work, and the damage that financial irresponsibility could cause to innocent people. Patricia had undergone her own transformation. After nearly losing her house to foreclosure, she'd downsized to a modest apartment and entered financial counseling to address her decades of enabling Emma's destructive behavior. "I thought I was helping her by solving all her problems," Patricia had admitted during one of our family therapy sessions. "Instead, I was preventing her from learning how to solve problems herself." The asset recovery process had exceeded all expectations. Federal investigators located over $400,000 in hidden accounts, stolen merchandise, and real estate purchases made with fraudulent funds. Tyler's criminal network had been far more profitable than anyone initially realized. My share of the recovered assets was $187,000, more than enough to cover my stolen money repair, my BMW, and compensate for the emotional trauma of the experience. But the real victory wasn't financial. It was seeing Tyler's entire operation dismantled and his victims freed from years of manipulation and fear. During the asset forfeiture hearing, I'd met other victims from Tyler's previous schemes. Sarah Martinez from Denver had lost her entire inheritance to Tyler's romance fraud before he moved on to his next target. Robert Chen from Albuquerque had been blackmailed for 3 years after Tyler convinced his daughter to participate in identity theft. He told her that her family would disown her if they found out what she'd done, Robert explained. So she kept paying him to stay quiet, not realizing that silence was exactly what he wanted. The victim impact statements during Tyler's sentencing had been devastating. 43 families describing financial ruin, emotional trauma, and years of fear caused by Tyler's criminal enterprise. Some victims had attempted suicide. Others had divorced or estranged themselves from family members. Several had declared bankruptcy or lost their homes. But there were also stories of recovery and resilience. Victims who'd found strength in each other, families who'd grown closer through the process of healing, and communities that had learned to recognize and prevent financial manipulation. Emma had become particularly effective as a victim advocate, using her experience to help other women recognize the warning signs of romance fraud. She spoke at community centers, colleges, and law enforcement training sessions about Tyler's manipulation techniques. "He made me feel special and chosen," she would tell audiences. "He convinced me that normal family relationships were holding me back from achieving my dreams. He isolated me from people who cared about me and replaced them with people who were using me." Her transformation was genuine and sustained. She'd enrolled in community college to study social work, maintained steady employment at a nonprofit organization, and rebuilt relationships with family members based on honesty and mutual respect, rather than financial dependency. Patricia had also found purpose in helping other families affected by financial manipulation. She volunteered with senior services, teaching older adults how to recognize and avoid fraud schemes targeting elderly people. I enabled destructive behavior for years because I thought that's what love looked like. She would tell support groups. I learned that real love sometimes means saying no, setting boundaries, and allowing people to face consequences for their choices. The legal proceedings had revealed the sophisticated psychology behind Tyler's operation. Dr. Amanda Foster, the FBI's expert on romance fraud, explained during trial testimony how criminals like Tyler identified and exploited specific vulnerabilities in their targets. Thompson studied his victims for weeks or months before making contact, she testified. He researched their financial situations, family dynamics, and emotional needs. Then he crafted a persona designed to appeal specifically to each individual victim's fantasies and insecurities. Emma had fit Tyler's preferred victim profile perfectly: emotionally vulnerable, limited financial literacy, access to family money, and a history of using emotional manipulation to get her needs met. Tyler had essentially outmanipulated a manipulator, using her own tactics against her more skillfully than she could use them herself. But the most important outcome of the entire ordeal was the reconstruction of our family relationships on a foundation of honesty, accountability, and mutual respect. We'd established clear financial boundaries, regular communication protocols, and consequences for destructive behavior. Emma's probation officer, Jennifer Walsh, had become an unofficial family counselor, helping us navigate the complexities of rebuilding trust while maintaining appropriate accountability. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, she reminded us during our monthly check-ins. It means choosing to move forward while learning from past mistakes. The insurance company had apologized formally for initially denying my claim and had offered me a position as a consultant for fraud prevention. My experience with Tyler's scheme had given me insights into financial manipulation that were valuable for protecting other potential victims. You understand both the criminal mindset and the victim experience, explained Linda Thompson, the insurance company's fraud prevention director. That combination is rare and extremely valuable for developing better protection protocols. I'd accepted the consulting role, working part-time to develop training programs for insurance investigators and victim services coordinators. The work was meaningful and well compensated, providing additional income that helped accelerate Emma's restitution payments and Patricia's debt elimination. 6 months after Tyler's sentencing, our family gathered for Patricia's 60th birthday dinner at her new apartment. The celebration was modest but genuine, marked by laughter, honest conversation, and the comfortable silences that come with authentic relationships. "I never thought I'd say this," Emma said during her impromptu speech, "but I'm grateful for what happened with Tyler. Not the pain, or the betrayal, or the legal consequences, but for forcing us to examine our relationships and rebuild them honestly." Patricia nodded, raising her glass of sparkling cider. "To second chances and hard-earned wisdom." I looked around the table at my family, thinking about how far we'd traveled from that devastating phone call about my stolen BMW to this moment of genuine connection and mutual respect. Tyler's criminal scheme had nearly destroyed us, but it had also forced us to confront generational patterns of financial dysfunction and emotional manipulation. We were stronger now, individually and collectively. Emma had learned the value of honest work and personal accountability. Patricia had learned the difference between helping and enabling. I had learned that protecting myself financially actually enhanced my ability to help family members appropriately. The legal case was closed, the financial damages were recovered, and Tyler was beginning a prison sentence that would keep him away from potential victims for decades. But the real victory was sitting around Patricia's dining room table, sharing a meal, and honest conversation with people I loved and trusted again. Justice had been served, but more importantly, healing had begun. The call came on a rainy Thursday morning in November, exactly 8 months after Tyler's sentencing. Agent Chen's voice was urgent when I answered my phone. "We need to meet immediately," he said. "Tyler's former cellmate just provided information that changes everything we thought we knew about your case." I drove to FBI headquarters through downtown Austin traffic, my mind racing through possibilities. Tyler was securely imprisoned. His accomplices were serving their sentences, and the financial recovery was complete. What could possibly have changed? Agent Chen met me in the lobby with 2 other agents I didn't recognize. Their expressions were grim as they escorted me to a secure conference room on the 4th floor. Marcus Thompson, aka Tyler Brennan, was planning to kill Emma after the wedding. Agent Chen began without preamble. But that was just the beginning. He had a detailed plan to eliminate your entire family and make it look like a murder-suicide caused by guilt over insurance fraud. The words hit me like a physical blow. "What?" Agent Sarah Mitchell, one of the new agents, opened a thick file folder and spread photographs across the conference table. Thompson's cellmate is Vincent Carlisle, a former hitman serving life for multiple murders. Thompson tried to hire Carlisle to kill 3 targets after his release. The photographs showed handwritten notes in Tyler's distinctive penmanship. My name, Emma's name, and Patricia's name were at the top of what appeared to be a detailed assassination plan. He wanted to eliminate witnesses to his crimes. Agent Mitchell continued. The plan was sophisticated: stage Emma's death as suicide, then kill you and your mother in a way that looked like grief-driven murder-suicide. Tyler would have collected life insurance on Emma while eliminating everyone who could testify against him. Agent Chen placed additional documents on the table. Thompson had researched your family's life insurance policies, inheritance arrangements, and daily routines. He knew your work schedule, your mother's medical appointments, and Emma's therapy sessions. From prison, he's been communicating with associates on the outside using coded letters and unauthorized phone calls. We've identified at least 6 people still working for his criminal network, including 2 who have been conducting surveillance on your family for months. The scope of the continuing threat was terrifying. Even imprisoned Tyler had been orchestrating plans to murder us. His criminal organization was larger and more persistent than anyone had realized. Vincent Carlisle approached us because Thompson couldn't pay for the contract killing, Agent Mitchell explained. Thompson promised $50,000 for the 3 murders, but he doesn't have access to that kind of money in prison. Carlisle got suspicious and decided to cooperate with authorities instead. Agent Chen showed me transcripts of conversations between Tyler and his cellmate. The level of detail was chilling. Tyler had mapped out our daily routines, identified the best times and locations for attacks, and planned specific methods designed to avoid detection. He studied crime scene investigation techniques, Agent Chen said. Thompson wanted the murders to look convincing to forensic investigators. He researched ballistics DNA evidence and psychological profiling to create a perfect murder-suicide scenario. My hands were shaking as I read through Tyler's handwritten plans. He documented my driving route to work, Patricia's grocery shopping schedule, and Emma's volunteer activities with victim advocacy organizations. Every detail of our rebuilt lives had been cataloged for use in planning our deaths. How long has this been going on? We believe, since shortly after his sentencing. Agent Mitchell replied. Thompson has been using his time in prison to plan revenge against the people who destroyed his criminal operation. The conversation was interrupted by Agent Chen's phone. He answered, listened for several minutes, then hung up with a grim expression. Thompson's associates just made their move, he said. Surveillance teams observed 2 men conducting reconnaissance of your apartment building this morning. We arrested them before they could carry out any attacks, but this confirms that the threat was immediate and real. Federal marshals escorted me from FBI headquarters to a safe house in North Austin, while agents arrested the remaining members of Tyler's criminal network. The operation involved coordinated raids across 4 states, targeting associates who'd been planning attacks on multiple victims from Tyler's previous schemes. Emma and Patricia were moved to separate safe houses, while investigators determined the full scope of the continuing conspiracy. Tyler's reach from prison had been far more extensive than anyone suspected. He's been running his organization like a CEO, Agent Mitchell explained during a secure video conference that evening. Thompson maintained detailed records of all his former victims, their current addresses and activities, and plans for eliminating anyone who could provide evidence against his network. The investigation revealed that Tyler's criminal organization had continued operating even after his imprisonment. His associates had been conducting new romance fraud schemes, identity theft operations, and vehicle theft rings using the methods Tyler had developed. We've identified 67 new victims across 8 states, Agent Chen reported. Thompson's organization has generated over $800,000 in fraudulent revenue since his arrest. But the most disturbing revelation came when agents decoded Tyler's prison communications. He hadn't just been planning to kill my family. He'd been orchestrating the murders of 17 other victims who testified against him or his associates. Thompson viewed witness elimination as a business necessity, Agent Mitchell explained. He calculated that killing former victims would prevent future prosecutions and allow his organization to operate with impunity. Federal prosecutors decided to pursue additional charges against Tyler for conspiracy to commit murder from prison. The new evidence included detailed murder plans, communications with hired killers, and ongoing criminal organization leadership. Thompson will receive additional life sentences for these charges, the prosecutor assured me. But more importantly, we've dismantled his entire network and prevented dozens of planned attacks. The safe house period lasted 3 weeks, while federal agents tracked down every member of Tyler's organization and secured all potential victims. The scope of the operation was massive, involving over 200 law enforcement officers across multiple states. Emma's reaction to the news was particularly intense. She'd been rebuilding her life and helping other victims unaware that Tyler had been planning her death from prison. "I thought I was safe," she said during our secure video call. "I thought testifying against him meant the nightmare was over." "It is over now," I assured her. "Tyler's network is destroyed and he'll never get out of prison." Patricia handled the news with surprising strength. "I'm not surprised," she said. "Someone capable of the emotional manipulation Tyler inflicted would certainly be capable of murder. We're fortunate that we survived long enough for justice to catch up with him." The final arrests came on a Friday afternoon, when federal agents raided a warehouse in San Antonio, where Tyler's associates had been planning to construct explosive devices for use in the planned murders. The sophistication of their operation was terrifying detailed floor plans of our homes, timing schedules for our daily routines and backup plans, if initial attacks failed. Thompson's organization was essentially a murder-for-hire business, disguised as romance fraud, Agent Chen explained. He'd moved beyond simple theft to systematic elimination of witnesses and potential threats. The evidence seized from the warehouse included photographs of my family, taken without our knowledge, detailed maps of our neighborhoods, and recorded conversations from illegal surveillance devices that had been placed in our homes months earlier. "They've been watching you since Tyler's trial," Agent Mitchell revealed. "Every family gathering, every therapy session, every victim advocacy event Emma attended. They documented everything for use in planning perfect murders." Tyler's final defeat came during his sentencing hearing for the additional murder conspiracy charges. Federal prosecutors presented overwhelming evidence of his continued criminal leadership from prison, including recorded conversations with hitmen and detailed murder plans. The defendant shows no remorse, no rehabilitation, and continues to pose an extreme danger to society, Judge Harrison said during sentencing. This court sentences Marcus Thompson to life imprisonment without possibility of parole to be served consecutively with his previous sentence. Tyler finally showed emotion during the hearing, screaming threats at the judge and promising revenge against everyone who'd betrayed him. His mask of sophisticated manipulation had finally slipped, completely revealing the violent psychopath underneath. As federal marshals dragged Tyler from the courtroom, he looked directly at me and mouthed the words, "This isn't over." But it was over. Tyler's criminal organization was destroyed, his associates were imprisoned, and the man himself would die in federal prison. The nightmare that began with a stolen BMW had finally ended with complete victory for his victims and total defeat for his criminal empire. Emma, Patricia, and I returned to our rebuilt lives with enhanced security measures, but genuine peace of mind. Tyler had thrown everything he had at destroying us, and he'd failed completely. We were stronger, safer, and more united than ever before. The final victory belonged not to Tyler's criminal genius, but to the resilience of ordinary people who refused to be victimized, and the dedication of law enforcement officers who never stopped fighting for justice. 2 years have passed since Tyler received his final life sentence, and I'm sitting in my rebuilt home office on a sunny Saturday morning, preparing for a presentation to the National Association of Insurance Fraud Investigators. The BMW sits in my driveway fully restored and serving as a daily reminder of how far my family has traveled from our darkest moments. Emma just called to tell me she graduated summa cum laude from her social work program and has been accepted to graduate school at the University of Texas. She's become one of the state's most effective victim advocates, helping over 200 families recognize and escape financial manipulation schemes. "I never thought I'd say this," she told me yesterday, "but Tyler's betrayal was the best thing that ever happened to my character development. It forced me to become the person I was supposed to be all along." She's right. Emma today bears little resemblance to the entitled, emotionally manipulative person who demanded $19,000 for an engagement party. She works full-time at a nonprofit organization, maintains her own apartment, and has saved enough money to pay for graduate school without taking loans. Patricia has undergone an equally dramatic transformation. She sold her oversized house, eliminated all debt, and now lives comfortably in a small apartment near downtown Austin. She volunteers 20 hours per week with senior services teaching financial literacy to older adults. "I wasted decades enabling destructive behavior because I thought that's what love looked like," she reflected during our monthly family dinner last week. "Now, I understand that real love sometimes requires letting people face consequences for their choices." The victim advocacy work has become a family mission. Patricia speaks to parent support groups about recognizing financial manipulation in adult children's relationships. Emma counsels young women about romance fraud warning signs. I consult with law enforcement agencies about family-based financial crimes. Tyler's case has become a landmark in federal prosecution of organized romance fraud. The techniques developed for investigating his network are now standard protocol for similar cases nationwide. Over 400 victims have been identified and compensated through asset forfeiture programs. Special Agent Shen calls me regularly with updates about new cases that follow patterns similar to Tyler's operation. The training materials we developed together have helped law enforcement officers recognize sophisticated financial manipulation schemes before they destroy entire families. Your family's willingness to fight back publicly has saved countless others from similar victimization, he told me recently. Most families prefer to handle financial fraud privately, which allows criminals to continue operating undetected. The insurance industry has implemented new protocols for detecting staged vehicle thefts based on our case. The Thompson pattern is now part of standard training for fraud investigators nationwide. Dr. Amanda Foster, the FBI's romance fraud expert, has written extensively about Tyler's psychological manipulation techniques. Her research helps mental health professionals identify and treat victims of financial abuse within family relationships. The Thompson case revealed how professional criminals exploit existing family dysfunction, she explained during a recent conference. "He didn't create the problems in your family. He weaponized them for criminal purposes." Emma's therapy sessions have helped her understand how Tyler identified and exploited her specific vulnerabilities. Her emotional neediness, financial irresponsibility, and tendency toward manipulation made her an ideal target for someone with Tyler's skills. He studied me for months before we even met, she realized. Tyler knew about my college debt, my relationship with you and Mom, and my insecurities about not being successful enough. He crafted his entire persona to appeal to my specific emotional needs. The personal growth has been remarkable for all of us. Emma has developed genuine empathy for other people's financial struggles. Patricia has learned healthy boundaries in relationships. I've discovered the difference between helping family members and enabling destructive behavior. Our monthly family meetings continue with a professional mediator, focusing on maintaining honest communication and appropriate boundaries. We've created written agreements about financial support, emergency assistance, and relationship expectations. The recovered assets allowed me to establish a victim compensation fund that provides emergency assistance to families affected by romance fraud and financial manipulation. Emma serves on the board of directors using her experience to guide policy decisions. Tyler's criminal organization generated nearly $2 million in fraudulent revenue over 5 years. Federal asset forfeiture recovered approximately 60% of those funds, which were distributed to victims based on their documented losses. My personal recovery exceeded $190,000, including compensation for emotional trauma and lost opportunities. But the real value wasn't financial. It was the knowledge that we'd successfully fought back against sophisticated criminal manipulation. The legal precedents established by Tyler's prosecution have strengthened federal laws protecting families from financial fraud. Prosecutors now have better tools for pursuing organized romance fraud cases and recovering assets for victims. Vincent Carlisle, Tyler's former cellmate who exposed the murder conspiracy, received a reduced sentence for his cooperation. He continues providing information about other criminal organizations operating within the federal prison system. Tyler himself has been transferred to ADX Florence, the Supermax federal prison in Colorado, where he'll spend the rest of his life in solitary confinement. His attempts to continue criminal activities from prison earned him the most restrictive security classification in the federal system. Thompson represents the evolution of financial crime into psychological warfare, Agent Mitchell explained during a recent case review. He understood that destroying families emotionally was often more profitable than simply stealing money. The community response has been overwhelmingly supportive. Local media has followed our story as an example of successful victim advocacy and family resilience. Emma receives speaking invitations from colleges, community organizations, and law enforcement agencies nationwide. People need to hear that recovery is possible, she tells audiences. Financial manipulation can destroy families, but it doesn't have to be permanent. With accountability, hard work, and professional help, relationships can be rebuilt stronger than before. Patricia's senior advocacy work has helped identify and prevent dozens of financial scams targeting elderly people. Her personal experience with enabling destructive behavior gives her unique insights into family dynamics that make older adults vulnerable to manipulation. The therapeutic journey has revealed generational patterns of financial dysfunction that contributed to our vulnerability. Dad's sudden death had left us emotionally traumatized and financially disorganized, creating opportunities that Tyler exploited expertly. Grief makes people susceptible to financial predators, our family therapist explained. Criminals like Thompson specifically target families dealing with recent losses because their judgment is impaired and their financial arrangements are often chaotic. My consulting work with insurance companies has expanded into developing fraud prevention protocols for other industries. Banks, credit unions, and investment firms now use training materials based on our experience to protect customers from family-based financial manipulation. The research component has been particularly rewarding. Working with academic institutions to study romance fraud patterns has contributed to a growing body of knowledge about financial crimes targeting families. Dr. Foster's longitudinal study of Tyler's victims has revealed important insights about recovery and resilience. Families that fought back publicly like ours showed better long-term outcomes than those who handled the victimization privately. Public accountability creates external pressure for positive change. Her research concluded, victims who become advocates heal faster and more completely than those who retreat from community involvement. Emma's graduate school thesis will focus on developing intervention protocols for families at risk of financial manipulation. Her combination of personal experience and professional training makes her uniquely qualified to contribute to this field. The security measures we maintain are minimal but effective. We've learned to recognize warning signs of financial manipulation, maintain healthy skepticism about romantic relationships involving money, and communicate openly about financial concerns. Tyler's network has been completely dismantled. Federal prosecutors continue monitoring his communications and associations to prevent any resurgence of criminal activity. The investigation ultimately led to over 80 arrests across 12 states. The Thompson Organization was the most sophisticated romance fraud network we've ever encountered, Agent Chen reflected recently. But it also generated the most comprehensive law enforcement response. Other criminals have learned that this type of organized family manipulation will be met with overwhelming federal prosecution. The transformation of my own perspective has been profound. I've learned that protecting yourself financially isn't selfish. It's essential for being able to help others appropriately. Healthy boundaries strengthen relationships rather than weakening them. Emma's recovery has inspired other young women to recognize and escape abusive relationships involving financial manipulation. Her victim advocacy work has become a full-time calling that gives her life meaning and purpose. Patricia's journey from enabling to empowering has made her an effective counselor for other parents struggling with adult children's destructive behavior. She's learned that love sometimes requires difficult choices. As I prepare for today's presentation to insurance fraud investigators, I'm reflecting on the life lessons that emerged from our family's ordeal. First, true family support means protecting each other from harm, not enabling destructive behavior. Emma needed accountability, not endless financial rescues. Second, financial boundaries strengthen relationships rather than damaging them. Clear expectations and consequences create safety for everyone involved. Third, professional criminals exploit existing family dysfunction rather than creating it. Tyler weaponized our pre-existing problems for his criminal purposes. Fourth, accountability and consequences are expressions of love, not punishment. Emma's growth began when she faced real consequences for her choices. Fifth, healing requires each person to take responsibility for their role in creating vulnerability. We all made mistakes that Tyler exploited. Finally, protecting yourself financially enhances your ability to help others from a position of strength rather than weakness. Our story has become a case study in successful victim advocacy and family resilience. But more importantly, it's proof that ordinary people can defeat sophisticated criminal manipulation through determination, courage, and mutual support. Tyler thought he'd identified easy victims who would quietly absorb financial losses to avoid family embarrassment. He underestimated our willingness to fight back publicly and our ability to transform victimization into advocacy for others. The nightmare that began with Emma's phone call about my stolen BMW has become a foundation for helping other families avoid similar devastation. Tyler's criminal genius ultimately served to strengthen our family bonds and create resources for protecting other potential victims. Justice was served completely, but the real victory is the life we've built from the wreckage of Tyler's betrayal. Emma has become the person she was meant to be. Patricia has learned healthy parenting boundaries. I've discovered the power of turning personal trauma into public advocacy. As I look toward the future, I see a family that's stronger, wiser, and more united than we ever were before Tyler's criminal manipulation exposed our vulnerabilities. We've learned that love sometimes requires difficult choices, that healing demands accountability, and that protecting yourself creates the foundation for helping others. The phone call that began our nightmare has become the beginning of our redemption. I'd love to hear from anyone who's dealt with family financial betrayal or romance fraud? Have you experienced manipulation by someone you trusted? How did you rebuild relationships after financial betrayal? What warning signs do you think families should watch for? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to like this video if it helped you understand financial manipulation better. Subscribe for more stories about overcoming family crises and betrayal. And please share this with anyone who might benefit from hearing about successful recovery from financial fraud. Thank you for joining me on this journey of healing and justice. And I hope our family's story helps protect yours from similar manipulation.